All of this knowledge will eventually become my superpower. I believe it's what I needed to see in order to keep moving forward with our lives. So in that regard, if I had anything to thank my sisters for, it would be thank you.
Thank you to all of those who have subscribed recently. That has been a huge boost. Don't think that we haven't noticed. We love the comments, we love the engagement, we love the views, and the thing that helps us the most is every time our subscribers go up, we reach more people and we're able to keep producing higher quality videos. So please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's get on to the show. Welcome to Bear It All, the Kintsugi Chronicles, here on the I Am Not Okay channel, where we gather our broken pieces in search of gold. MJ Bear is flying solo today. John Bear and Holly Bear are with you in spirit. MJ, what's today's topic? Take it away.
Thank you, John, for that marvelous introduction.
You're welcome, Mom.
Good morning. Hello. MJ of Bear It All, the Kintsugi Chronicles. I'm here today because I have notes, by the way, in case you see me looking down. I am working off of notes today. There are some specific issues that I'd like to delve into a little deeper. And in one particular case, the abuse, the narcissistic abuse perpetrated within our family, my family of origin in particular, is occurring in real time as a result of our YouTube channel. I hope you'll want to stay till the end of this video, this podcast, in order to learn how you can employ logic as your superpower in overcoming some of the emotional dysregulation that we all feel when these situations are occurring. From my perspective, when it came to my family of origin, these issues, the dysfunction, the abuse, the, abject confusion has been lifelong. And I default to isolation. I default to keeping as much of this under wraps as humanly possible. I didn't want to discuss it. I really never wanted to discuss it with anyone. In the aftermath of Tony's death, I convinced myself that when I walked away, it would be permanent. That was my choice to make this estrangement permanent. And at that point, I shut down completely with regard to my family, my former husband's family. The only thing that was important were my kids and myself. We were still reeling from Tony's death. And then dealing with abusive personalities on top of it. At times became too much, or felt like it became too much. The best I could do, or the best I thought I could do at the time, was nothing. I convinced myself I'll never have all the answers to these questions. This is a permanent solution as far as I was concerned. And I didn't think I needed to do anything more other than walk away and help myself and my family get back on our feet, to heal, to bring our family back together. I've subsequently learned that by not doing anything, by not saying anything, by not attempting to understand what transpired, I've prolonged I mistakenly thought, if I don't deal with it, it won't be there. I kept most of these things under wraps. I've worked with people for close to 30 years who have absolutely no idea that any of this has occurred in my life. These are people I spent at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in their company, and they had no idea what my family was going through. So as a result of keeping everything under wraps, all I did was prolong the pain, prolong the agony. And wound up very ill for a while as a result. So we chose to produce our podcast knowing that some of the individuals we discuss in our podcast, individuals who are part of the story, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about the fact that some of these people are part of the story. So we knew that eventually our podcast would make its way to some of these people. As a result, we intentionally chose to identify ourselves from the beginning. We're not hiding what we're doing. By the same token, I personally am not speaking directly to my family. I have no doubt that opening the lines of communication in that regard will only result in more pain. I haven't seen or witnessed any significant changes that would require me to rethink my position here. And by significant changes, I'm talking about self-reflection. I'm talking about accepting accountability for our transgressions, accepting accountability for the fact that none of this happened in a vacuum. Everyone involved in these families is a participant in one way or the other. We've all contributed to this particular outcome. I'm not here to absolve myself of my own transgressions. In fact, this is part of the process for me. I've been beating myself up for years because of the mistakes I've made. At any rate, we knew that our family would learn of our podcast. What I wasn't quite expecting was any conversation with regard to my former family. There's been no conversation between myself and my members of my family, former family. And I want to stress actually from the start here, as I said, I knew that my family would learn of our podcast and that whatever happens, happens. And I want to say right off the bat, the fact that my family is commenting amongst themselves and they're doing it online is not stalking. My family isn't stalking me. They aren't stalking my children. We put this out here intentionally. We knew that they would learn about it. I know I've said that 50 times already today. I apologize. But they're not stalking us. They're responding to what they're witnessing, and they have every right to respond to what they're witnessing amongst themselves. There's no reason that they can't. In fact, if they chose to respond to me, for example, they're entitled to do that. So don't think that We're putting these videos out on the internet in order to bait someone to talk to us and then tell the world that they're stalking us. Nobody's being stalked here. That's not what this situation is at all. I want to say that speaking for myself, I'm confident that my words and my actions with regard to my former family and how things have gone down over the years, I'm confident that my words and my conduct are congruent. What I'm talking about here on our podcast are my convictions regarding my life. And they're convictions that are based on experience, facts, and evidence. I'm very much detail and logic driven. And I've learned very recently that as human beings, we spin out of control when something doesn't make sense, when we can't understand the reason for these things occurring. Our brains go haywire. We need logic. We need to understand what happened, how it happened, why it happened, in order to mitigate against it in the future. Logic is the one thing I use personally that takes me out of my own head. It's not emotional. It doesn't make me feel bad about the situation. I can look at the facts, I can look at the evidence, I can look at the patterns of behavior and see where these things went south. I'm also able to recognize my transgressions, the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, which have contributed to the longevity of this kind of abuse. And in that regard, I am culpable for the continuation of this, up to and including our podcast. If my family were confident in their convictions, they'd provide evidence to substantiate their accusations regarding my fitness as a human being, not merely as a family member, but they would have the evidence and the facts to say, look, this is why we say she's insane, or this is why we say she can't take responsibility for her life. And here's the evidence to support what we're saying. Their words and their actions would be congruent. And their words and actions have never been congruent. What they say and who they are turn out to be very different. That's why I'm here today. All they ever had to do was answer questions. I'm not trying to be difficult when I ask these questions. I'm truly in the dark. I don't understand why my family would do these things. Asking a question isn't defiance. It isn't trying to shirk my own responsibility. It's meant to facilitate a conversation with individuals in my family. I will say this. I'm telling you how I'm feeling in the moment as these things are occurring. This is real time, and it's in response to what we've talked about thus far. I'm shocked by the conversation I've witnessed between my siblings and their children. I feel like a fly on the wall because their online postings were brought to my attention. And I think I've said this in the past, that when something crops up on the radar, I look into it. I'd be a fool to ignore something that's right in my face. Is this something I need to be concerned with, or is it something I just need to file away for future reference? Or maybe it's nothing at all. But yes, I'm going to pay attention to what's happening in my family across the internet for the sake of our safety. I have to be real here. It's safety. My family has been attempting to circumvent my life for a very long time. And I think that's part of the problem here, actually. This conversation that I witnessed isn't something I ever would have expected to experience, and I likely never will again. I've never in all my years witnessed a conversation between members of my family with regard to this issue. Everything that they've done amongst themselves is handled in a vacuum tunnel, an echo chamber. So I don't know what they've been discussing. I don't know what they believe the issues are. I don't know any of these things. This conversation is so eye-opening and shocking. And it boils down to I'm witnessing the cause, which is our podcast, and the effect, which is their realization that we're doing the podcast and the content of our podcast. And I feel like an eavesdropper, to be honest. It's on the internet. It's not blocked. There's no reason anybody in the world can't read these things, but I still feel a little shady about it, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. There's nothing shady actually going on. It was brought to my attention. I read some of the postings. And as shocked as I am, it's probably not for the reasons you might think. In the past, I've asked questions of my family over and over and over again. Weirdly enough, my family, at least with me, don't really communicate. In fact, I can say that this result isn't due to a lack of communication, it's the absence of communication. And I'm seeing it happen right now. As we've produced our podcasts, I've asked specific questions, not of my family at this point, questions I've asked in the past. As I said, why would you support my former husband, the man who abused my children? They all have what appear to be serious complaints about me as an individual, and yet none of these people have ever come to me and said, hey, Jojo, I heard this about you. Is it true? Or my sisters, hey, Mom just told me whatever. Did that happen? I've never had these conversations with my sisters. I've never had them with my parents. I've never had them with anybody in my family. I know for a fact that the only thing I'm discussing here are circumstances that I've experienced with my family, or I've seen the evidence that substantiates circumstances that I've heard or learned of over the years. What I also know for a fact is I can't possibly know who any of these people are beyond the scope of what I'm discussing here. I don't know who my sisters are beyond this situation. I don't know who their children are beyond this situation. I can't possibly know these things. So it perplexes me, and it causes me to take a step back, because these individuals are absolutely certain They know who I am, what I've said, what I think, what I feel, without being in my life. I'd like to understand how they can know these things. And of course, the answer is they don't. They can't possibly know these things, not about me, not about my children, because we've never had these conversations. They've never been a part of my adult life. I haven't been a part of theirs. No wonder I'm confused about my life. At any rate, the conversation between my sisters and their children essentially revolves around denigrating my character as well as my children, questioning my sanity, mocking our attempts to drag ourselves up and make something positive out of all of this. That's the goal here. And so we're asking valid questions, or I was asking valid questions back in the day, and I've brought some of those up here. Why are you doing these things? Why would you collude with the man that you hated the whole time I was married to him? And here you are, buddies or alliances for 20, 30 years. And again, you've never talked to me about any of this. My former husband also has never talked to me about any of this. You have two groups of people who are discussing me and my children, my transgressions, but none of these people have ever come to me with complaints. They've never given me an opportunity to defend myself. They've never given me an opportunity to accept responsibility for my transgressions. They've never given me an opportunity to apologize when I have, in fact, made mistakes and errors in judgment. They've never given me the opportunity to attempt to make amends. In other words, due to the absence of communication, my family is holding these issues hostage. There can be no movement in any direction. You can't put it to rest because you haven't resolved it, or at least reached the conclusion that we're not going to come to a resolution, that we agree to disagree, that we agree to part ways. And once that happens, all parties go their own way and there's no crossover. None of these things have happened. It's weird. I'm just going to say what it is. It's weird that these people would complain all these years about me, and yet they don't want me in their lives. They don't want me in their lives, but they spent decades stalking me, harassing me, showing up in my life uninvited and unwelcome, almost daring me to have a meltdown. Those situations were created between my former spouse and my family to try to push me over the edge, to try to invoke an emotional outburst so that they can look over at the crazy one and say, "Told you she was nuts." See, this is why I sometimes just want to forget all about this. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's actually humorous. But mostly, it's devastating or rather has been devastating. And that's another reason I wanted to bring this topic up. So my sisters and their children are, again, questioning our character, questioning my sanity, and doing what they've always done. Avoid even acknowledging that issues exist. We're talking about valid issues over here. Why are you doing these things? And the response is, oh, she can't take responsibility for her life. She blames everybody for everything that went wrong in her life. I don't remember all the things that I've read recently. And they're doing this, by the way, using the 21st century language of meme speak, where one will post a meme and the other will post a meme in response. And they're always something to do with, again, sanity, character, oh, poor you. This sounds ridiculous talking about it, doesn't it? Damn, it's times like this where I understand why people don't want to talk about their experiences with narcissistic abuse, family dysfunction, abuse of any kind. Sometimes it sounds petty, sometimes it sounds ridiculous. I'm sure there are people saying, well, then why the hell don't you just walk away from these people? That's what I was trying to do, walk away from these people. The memes that are being posted, of course, are meant to convey their sentiments about our podcast without actually expressing their own thoughts about it. This is very standard in my family. They use what I believe are pseudo-philosophical quotes meant to convey their feelings through someone else's words. I have one sister who's used the quote, which has been attributed to Gandhi. Gandhi didn't actually say this, but the quote is something along the lines of, be the change you want to see in the world. The youngest sister is the one who uses that quote in particular. And based on my experiences with my younger sister, it wouldn't be out of line to conclude that the change she wants to see in the world is to wreak havoc, is to scorch the earth behind her. She speaks about all of these philosophical, be kind, be gentle, be this, be that, while behind the scenes, this is what they're doing. So you either be yourself in public and private, or you risk being called out on your public charm offensive when there's a very different person behind that front door. The attempt, I believe, is to try to alter the content of our videos, to draw attention away from the fact that, again, questions, valid questions, this is what happened. Let's not talk about what actually occurred, and let's tell the world how crazy my sister is. That's standard operating procedure in my family as well. Ask you a direct question. I don't believe I've ever gotten a direct answer from anyone in my family. This is a lifelong struggle, and one of the reasons walking away was the best course of action at the time, and it's still the best course of action, at least for me. For the sake of the argument, let's presume I've been diagnosed with every known mental health condition, and personality disorder at the same time. Let's say I am all of these things, okay? My siblings have put this out on the internet. They're attempting to advance the conversation, saying, don't listen to my sister, she's a lunatic. Okay, I'm a lunatic. My character and my sanity, however, are immaterial when it comes to their conduct. No one controls your conduct. No one controls my conduct except us, ourselves. So they're taking the issues, they're conflating it, and they're regurgitating what they said 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. We don't answer the questions, we don't deal with the issue, but we'll tell everyone, tell the world, and ourselves, she's a lunatic, we're not going to pay attention to her. I completely missed how my family did this because I never knew what was going on within that echo chamber. I couldn't understand, for example, why my mother never made any attempt to repair her relationship with me, never made an attempt to repair her relationship with my children. It didn't make sense to me, and it was one of those issues that kept cropping up in my life. I don't get it. I don't understand it. How can I spill my guts to these people? And they completely ignore the fact that metaphorically, here I am writhing in pain, saying, look, what you're doing is hurting me. What you're doing is hurting my children. And instead of attempting to have a conversation, they mock what I've said. They mock. When I tell them you're hurting me, then they double down, triple down, and continue with those same behaviors. Why would you testify against me in court, Andrea? She did this at the very beginning of my divorce. Or why would you want to testify against me in court? She did this at the beginning of our my separation and divorce. And I did ask her that question after Tony died. And I got what I believe is a response that told me exactly who Andrea is. See, I lose my place. This is right now, right here, this moment is a throwback to the confusion I felt for most of my life. When someone says to me, you're hurting me, I feel terrible. I feel obligated to apologize, to make amends, no matter how big or how small that transgression is. I don't believe cruelty needs to be a part of our lives in this respect. Even as I know that, damn it, the cruelty in these families is off the charts. At any rate, here I am going off tangent again. What you're seeing is somebody who's just dealing with another blip on the radar. So before I get lost again, the questions. Why don't you defend your conduct? If these are your convictions and you believe that what you're doing is absolutely necessary, why don't you defend your conduct? Why don't you provide the justification for your conduct? Why? I need to back up just for a moment. When my parents were going through their divorce, I said it was acrimonious. I don't think that's a strong enough word. Something else was occurring at the same time, which was my parents creating division in the family. My mother created this division where she kicked me out, and my sisters went along with my mother. Nobody was speaking to my father. I wasn't part of the family. So my father and I, we were the bums, I guess. We only had each other, which really meant that I was just my father's sounding board. This is going to sound terrible. No, it's going to make me sound terrible. In fact, none of this makes me look or sound good, but it is what it is. My relationship with my father, I always thought was love. And it wasn't. I gravitated to my father because my mother didn't want me around. And I took that relationship growing up. This was growing up. I took that relationship with my father and decided somehow, somewhere along the line, that my dad is my person, that I could trust him.
Thank you for making it this far in our show. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. Just know that you're not alone, that we're here with you, and we're going to work through this together. If you need some help or assistance, dial 988 or head over to our website, www.iamnotok.com, www.iamnotok.com for a space where you can breathe. And if you want to send us an email and let us know how you're doing, we can get back to you as soon as we can and make sure that you're on the right path. Now, back to the show.
That he'd be there when I needed him. And that's not the way it was at all. My father didn't need people in his life. He needed people to support his life. My dad wasn't a man who considered himself first among equals. My father was absolutely certain he had no equals. And as a result, because of the power he wielded, he believed he could do whatever he wanted when he wanted. And that's what he did. I became his sounding board. I became his de facto cook, washed his clothes, cooked his meals, helped him do this, helped him do that. I became a second wife in that regard. And I kept doing it over and over and over again for 50 years. That's embarrassing as hell, isn't it? Sorry for that interlude. This is how I'm feeling. This is what's happening in my world, in my head, in my life right now. So to get back on track, let me say that what I witnessed between my sisters and their children it's turned out to be a gift that I never knew I needed. When I said I was shocked, about their conversations, their communication, it's not for the reasons you might think. My sisters were conversing in a manner that I can only describe as middle school mean girl rhetoric, picking on or mocking an individual for how they think, what they say, what they look like, what they do. Mean girl rhetoric. You know, the gossip, pss, pss, behind your locker kind of thing. That's what my sisters are doing in the 21st century online. I see for the first time that my siblings haven't evolved beyond who they were in middle school. There were 4 girls in my family. And we had this weird habit. Maybe it's not so weird. We had this habit of factions would form. And a lot of the time, the faction would be 3 of us against 1 of us. It didn't matter who the 3 were. It didn't matter who the 1 was. The 3 who decided this one deserves to be abused or to be derided would gang up on the 1. And I know what we talked about because I was part of the 3 growing up. I would mock, look at her. She's too fat, she's too tall, she's too this, I participated in all of that. And what I'm seeing online right now is my sisters still acting and behaving in that manner, the mean girl rhetoric. That opened my eyes like I could never have imagined. It explains, so much to me and answers some of the questions I've had over my life. So let's be clear about this, okay? My siblings are all 60-plus-year-old women like me. I think they're grandmothers. Well, one of them's a grandmother. I don't know about the other one. And yet here they are using the same tactics they used when we were kids. It's bizarre. It's weird. And it's something I never anticipated being a part of this equation. I'm a little bit shocked that they put this online, in public, online. Knowing, or maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know. They put it online for anyone in the world to see. They're actually proving, by virtue of their conduct, what my kids and I have been talking about all along. There's never been any sincere attempt to have a conversation between any of us. And here they are, proving to you, proving to me, proving to anyone who knows this situation that what I've said all along is actually still occurring. It would have been very easy, again, for one of them to contact us and say, what the hell are you doing? Why would you put this on the internet? Why won't you talk to me about it? None of that is occurring. Any valid question isn't being denied. It's simply being ignored and will deflect with something else, which is the mean girl rhetoric. And this little interlude is a fair and accurate representation of what's occurred throughout my life with regard to my family. It's, I don't know, it's like the universe said, let's throw her a bone and show her at least a little bit of why she couldn't make sense of these things in the past. The exchange between them is something I never experienced. And as a result of this little interlude, I now understand why my questions all these years have gone unanswered. I understand why None of them ever made an attempt to deal with these relationship issues. I finally understand that I'm not actually the problem, that there was never anything I could have done or said that would have made any difference. And I'm learning this because I'm seeing that exchange between my sisters, and I've never witnessed it before. I know I'm going to talk about this again because it's answering so many questions for me. And now I'm feeling, it's not vindicated. It's not, I'm feeling more free, I think, than I ever did in the past. In other words, it isn't me. It's me, but it's not me. I didn't create these problems. I didn't perpetuate these problems. I've decided, that's another thing I've done through all of this. My family doesn't want to answer questions. I've decided I need to answer questions that I can answer. I went into this knowing I'll never have all the answers to everything, but that I can get closer to the truth in some regard. This isn't something I ever expected to know. I realize now that whenever I tried to communicate with my family, my parents and my siblings would discuss me in the echo chamber as if I were subhuman, as if I were beneath them, that I was an object or a thing rather than a person. A person says, "You're hurting me," and your response is to continue to hurt them. There is only one solution for that type of situation, and that's to walk away. I didn't understand that back then. This situation is also helping my kids realize that they're not the problem either. Our family isn't the problem here. I haven't been in their lives in 30, 40 years. What I do know also for certain is this. Almost 10 years ago, I took myself down the shore. I realized that I can't get past any of this or get through any of this, avoiding what I'd always been avoiding. I didn't go past the house I lived in, the schools I went to, the neighborhood I lived in for 40 years. I avoided that part of town like the plague in order to try to understand some of these things. I had to get past that fear, and it was fear. I've had a lifelong habit of attaching emotions to objects. I couldn't understand that for a long time, but I've realized now, because these people weren't in my life, and I wanted them to be, and I wanted to be a part of my family, I had this weird habit of attaching emotion to objects. And I'd look around my house and I'd see, oh, my mother gave me that, or my sister gave me that. And I thought, they must have cared at one point, or they wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have given me that thing or that object. And I think it was my way of having my family around me, but not having my family around me. I'm sorry. In addition to attaching emotion to the objects, I also attach a tremendous amount of emotion to those physical places the house I grew up in, my elementary school, the way we used to cut through the park to get to middle school, the way Tina would, without fail, bring food to feed. There was a lone deer in our little park that we cut through. This poor deer in I don't know, like a 16 by 16 pen with a little outbuilding attached to it. And this deer was locked up all its life in that little pen. And Tina, without fail, either on the way to school or on the way home from school, would make sure to bring something to feed the deer. Tina was always the Dr. Doolittle. When we were kids, we'd go down the shore. We'd head to the beach. Tina would head to the pet store. That's who she is. She was always that way. At any rate, these places, the park, the deer, the house, the schools, the police station, I avoided like the plague because of the memories and the emotions that I've attached to these places. And I did say previously that the first time I went past my house, drove down the street, I drove. I didn't look left or right, and I thought I wasn't going to make it to the next stop sign because I was going to have a panic attack. I felt so emotionally distraught in that moment. And so what I did about 10 years ago, I took myself down the shore. Because Wildwood, Magnolia Avenue, Wildwood, was our vacation spot until, the last time I was there, John was 2 or 3, maybe 4. So I was a mom when we finally stopped going down the shore, and we would go as a family. We went down the shore. It was the same week every year, second week in August. We stayed in the same house, in the same, it was this big old Victorian home on Magnolia Avenue with the double stairs coming down and the veranda. It was beautiful. It had been carved up into apartments on the bottom floor. There were 2 apartments, which is a misnomer, but that's another story. And then the upper level was single rooms for, couples or individuals. We would rent the same apartment. We had the back one. We went down the shore with my uncle. They had the front apartment. We did the same things every year, the same boardwalk, the same beach, the same amusements, the same foods, that kind of thing. And I hadn't been down the shore in a while. And I thought, I need to go down and take a walk past some of these things. I need to know if my memories are fabricated or if this house that I remember being here is still here. This restaurant or this building. I went down the shore, screwed up my courage, and I walked down Magnolia Avenue from the boardwalk. 4 blocks I walked when I realized I walked right past the house that we used to rent. I didn't know where the hell it was. I turn around, I come back, and the only reason I realized where it was, I don't even remember the address. I know it was Magnolia Avenue, but I don't remember the address. I remember where it was, which block. And I walked past the spot because the house had been torn down, and there's now 2 or 3 duplexes or, looks like every other shore town. The white buildings with... First thing I did was walk the boardwalk from Wildwood Crest to North Wildwood. And almost immediately, the memory started flooding back. The first place I walked past was Wildwood Convention Center. And it still looked the same. And I stopped for a couple minutes and I realized that maybe my memories aren't all fabricated. I remember this place. I remember being this place. I'm walking down the boardwalk, looking around. I come up on a little dogleg part of the boardwalk where you'd make a little left and then a right to go on down toward North Wildwood. At that little junction in the dogleg is an ice cream stand, a Coors Brothers frozen custard stand. And I stopped dead in my tracks. That was one of the places we would stop as kids. We're on the boardwalk doing the amusements and what have you. And my father would get a hankering for something sweet. We'd stop, we'd get frozen custard, ice cream cones. I can still see my dad standing there in line waiting. I could see him there. My mom was there. So I pulled myself together and turned around to keep walking. And as soon as I did, I saw two older women walking towards me. Older women like me, I should say. And they're walking towards me, arm in arm. And they're giggling and they're laughing and they're having a ball. Just strolling down the boardwalk. Damn it. And it struck me because I realized that'll never happen. It was a weird moment where I saw the past and the future almost at the same time. See, this is why I don't talk about these things. It was bizarre in the sense that, like I said, I saw the past and what should have been the future almost at the same time. And I don't know how. I don't know how. It all turned so horrible. I don't know how. That's why I'm here.
I hope if you're learning anything, it's to talk to your people. Have the hard conversations with your people. In truth, none of this ever had to happen. If there had been sincere conversations, I don't believe it ever would have happened. And that's what that moment represented to me. Something terrible went south. The past is here. The future, which should be here, isn't. And I'm there in the present. Still unsure as to how it all fell apart. I still don't know. I still cry. Not so much over what's been lost, rather more and more I'm seeing where my failures in all of this have prolonged the emotional quagmire that we find ourselves in today. At any rate, before I go, the growth that I wanted to talk about here is that situation. I stood there and cried. I don't even know how long I cried. Fortunately, it was off season. There's not a lot of hope, and not a lot of people down the shore at that point. But I thought, these people must think I'm a nut. I'm standing here crying and leaning over the railing on the boardwalk. But I needed to do that. I needed to let all of that go. I thought I had. Until today. I haven't talked about this particular situation either with anybody. Is it wrong to say I thought I'd have that with my sisters? I don't know. That was then. And this MJ is well aware of the fact that it's not going to happen. It'll never happen. And I'm coming to terms with the fact that it was never going to happen. That's the part of this that was missing. I didn't realize that all the time I spent trying to deal with the conflicts with my family were used as a way to mock me. Mean girl style. 10 years ago, this situation with the conversation with my family would have devastated me. I would have been an emotional basket case if I had seen my siblings communicate about me in this manner. Today, I'm not emotional about what I've witnessed. I'm
There's no pain, emotional pain. I don't feel sad over what I've seen. I don't feel regret for having paid attention to it. I feel, like I said, I feel freer than I've ever felt. Because I finally understand that this is what was meant to happen, I think. I wish I knew these things earlier in life. That's a huge reason. I keep saying the same things. It's a huge reason why I wanted to have these conversations with my kids. They shouldn't be 60-year-old people talking into a microphone, crying about what happened in their past. So these are all the positive reasons I think I'm fortunate in witnessing. If we hadn't begun our podcast, I never would have seen this exchange between my siblings. And knowing me, I'd still be wondering what I missed, what I could have done, what I should have done, what I didn't do. I was convinced I was the problem in my family until long after we ended any communication, and it wasn't me. Or rather, it wasn't what I said, it wasn't what I did. There's hatred there for some reason. I don't know why. On their parts. I don't even know. Do I hate them? I don't know. I'm still trying to find the answers to these questions, and I do hope that you'll stick around. I'm sure that we're going to get through this. I really am more hopeful than I have been in decades about my family, my little family. We are all we have. So we have to make every effort to cherish each other and ourselves. That's what we're doing here. What I witnessed here with my sisters was at one time what I would consider my Waterloo. It was the questions that I knew I'd never get answered. And I was convinced I never would. And here I am, seeing it for myself and not feeling at all emotionally devastated. Like I said, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I'd have been a basket case if I had seen that. I would have beat myself up for the next 10 years, 20 years, overseeing that. And finally, with regard to this topic, I'm also witnessing, or have witnessed, the fact that my sisters and their children are all of the same mindset here. My children are, I'm sorry, their children, not my children. Their children are, bizarrely enough, I think this is weird too, they're posting photographs of my kids. They spent a lot of time with my sister's children growing up, both sisters' children. So they have pictures of themselves growing up. What's weird to me is the fact that they have all these pictures like at their fingertips to post online in order to mock and deride their cousins, my kids. My sisters have passed along the abusive, narcissistic tendencies that we grew up with. That's shocking to me. It takes what I believed and makes it real in this regard. I've believed all along that the generational abuse that my family has perpetuated, I don't even know where it began, is still alive and it's still occurring. My youngest sister's grandchild is a little girl at this point. Well, not even little, a young girl at this point, a young child. And I'm absolutely certain that child has already been drawn into hatred for people they don't know, not because they learned to hate the individuals, but because they're told by their parents, this is who you hate. My siblings were also part of a generational trauma. My mother spent her lifetime driving a wedge between every member of her family, her children, her spouse, her siblings, her nieces, her nephews. Nobody was exempt from the wrath of my mother. No one is exempt from the wrath of my siblings. And apparently no one is exempt from the wrath of their children. It goes down the line as if they're all reading from the same script. All of this knowledge will eventually become my superpower. I believe it's what I needed to see in order to keep moving forward with our lives. So in that regard, if I had anything to thank my sisters for, it would be thank you for putting this out on the internet and giving me an opportunity to understand why walking away from my family was the best choice, is. It's still the best choice. Listen, there's so many situations that I still want to discuss on the podcast. I do hope that if you have questions, feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll be happy to answer them. I'm sure my kids will be happy to answer them too. I am sincerely thankful for this opportunity, and I do hope you'll return to see what we discuss next. Thank you so much for your time. I will see you soon.
Thank you for listening to our show. If you're interested in how we've gotten this far, I've put together a small guide that has a 3-step process at no cost. You can get that at www.iamnotok.com/truth. www.iamnotok.com/TRUTH. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you on the inside. Be well.